Welcome to the Never Ending Gnostic, where we explore the transformative teachings that emerge from the deepest layers of consciousness. I'm your host, Zero Hakathus, and today we're diving into wisdom received from Agrat Bat Malat, one of the four mothers of demons in Jewish mystical tradition, though what she revealed to me challenges everything we might assume about demonic forces and shows her true nature as a teacher of discernment and soul recognition. Agrat Bat Malat is often portrayed as a dangerous nocturnal figure who leads people astray from conventional paths. But what if her true role is actually to lead us away from surface judgments and toward deeper perception? What if she's not trying to deceive us, but rather to show us how often we deceive ourselves by trusting appearances over essence? Today's vision came in two parts. First, through meditation, then through dream, and reveals a profound teaching about learning to see beyond the mask that consciousness wears, whether divine or human. This is gnosis about developing the kind of discernment that recognizes character over appearance, essence over form, and the hidden connections that bind souls together across apparent differences. The vision began during meditation with the appearance of a blue-skinned genie with the head of a cow. Before I could fully process this image, it transformed into a blue-skinned cyclops. The same divine blue coloration, but now with a single central eye instead of the bovine head. The shape-shifting sequence reveals one of Agrat Bat Malat's primary teachings. Divine consciousness appears to us in whatever form we're capable of receiving in each moment, and we must learn not to become attached to any particular manifestation as the true or final form. The blue skin is consistent in both forms, representing the unchanging spiritual essence that underlies all manifestations. In many mystical traditions, blue represents the infinite sky of consciousness, the vast space of divine awareness that contains all forms while being limited by none. This blue coloration tells us we're encountering authentic spiritual force, regardless of how strange or challenging its specific manifestation might appear. The cow head in the first form carries profound symbolic weight. In many traditions, the cow represents sacred nourishment, maternal provision, and the principle of giving sustenance without violence. The cow consciousness offers milk, transformation of simple grass into life-giving nutrition through internal alchemical process. This suggests divine consciousness that nourishes seekers through its own mysterious inner transformations. But then this nourishing bovine consciousness shapeshifts into the cyclops, the single-eyed being that represents unified vision, the integration of dual perception into singular insight. The cyclops sees not through two eyes that can be confused by surface differences, but through one central eye that perceives essence directly. This transformation from cow to cyclops represents the evolution from receiving spiritual nourishment to developing spiritual vision. First, we need to be fed by divine consciousness. Then we need to learn to see like divine consciousness. The progression suggests that Agrat Bat Malat's teachings come in stages. First sustenance, then sight. The practical application is learning to recognize divine guidance even when it appears in forms that challenge our perceptions. The blue essence remains constant, but the manifestation changes to meet our developmental needs. Sometimes we need the nourishing cow consciousness. Sometimes we need the piercing vision of the cyclops. Both are authentic expressions of the same underlying spiritual force. The dream vision opened with me choosing a babysitter under the guidance of a father figure who was teaching me the crucial distinction between judging by appearance and discerning true character. This father figure represents the wise masculine principle with consciousness, not patriarchal authority that imposes arbitrary rules, but mature wisdom that teaches discernment through patient guidance. The act of choosing a babysitter is deeply symbolic. A babysitter is someone we trust with what's most precious and vulnerable, in this case representing the tender, developing aspects of our own consciousness that need protection and nurturing. The choice of caregiver isn't casual. It requires the kind of deep discernment that can recognize who will genuinely protect and nurture growth versus who might appear suitable but lack the character necessary for authentic care. The father figure's teaching, "Don't judge by looks, but discern by character," represents one of the most essential spiritual skills we can develop. In a world where we're constantly bombarded with surface impressions, marketing images, and social media presentations, the ability to perceive character beneath appearance becomes crucial, not just for choosing babysitters, but for navigating all relationships and spiritual teachings. My choice of a teenage female close to my age reveals important aspects of mature discernment. Rather than choosing someone who appeared more experienced, older, or conventionally qualified, I was guided to recognize character qualities that transcended surface credentials. The teenage female represents youthful energy combined with feminine, intuitive wisdom. Someone who could relate to and nurture the young aspects of consciousness without overwhelming them with inappropriate authority. This choice also suggests the recognition that sometimes the best caregivers for our developing consciousness aren't the most obviously qualified authorities, but those who combine genuine care with the ability to meet us where we are developmentally. In practical terms, this teaching applies to how we choose spiritual teachers and mentors, looking past impressive credentials to recognize authentic wisdom and genuine care for students. Friends and intimate partners, seeing through superficial attractiveness or social status to recognize character qualities that support mutual growth. Business associates and collaborators, discerning integrity and reliability beneath professional presentations. Communities and spiritual groups, recognizing healthy dynamics versus groups that look good on the surface but lack genuine spiritual maturity. The setting then shifted to a psychiatric hospital where I was working with female patients. This environment represents the realm where consciousness goes when it cannot adapt to conventional reality, where aspects of psyche that are too sensitive, too truthful, too visionary, or too wounded are segregated from mainstream society for treatment. But Agrat Batmalat's perspective on psychiatric settings challenges conventional assumptions. Rather than seeing these places as repositories for broken people, she reveals them as laboratories where we can study consciousness in its most undefended states, where the masks and social adaptations have been stripped away and we can observe the raw dynamics of psyche. Being assigned to work with one female patient who acted out once but calmed down reveals several layers of meaning. The female patient represents the wounded feminine aspect of consciousness, that part of psyche that has been traumatized, misunderstood, and pathologized by a conventional society. Her acting out followed by calming down suggests that what appears as mental illness often contains authentic responses to genuine problems, but that these responses can find resolution when met with appropriate understanding and care. The fact that she calmed down in response to my presence suggests that authentic connection and recognition can provide healing that medication and institutional protocols cannot. This represents the therapeutic power of being truly seen and accepted, especially for aspects of consciousness that have been rejected or labeled as problematic. My role as caregiver in this setting parallels the babysitting scenario. I'm being trained to recognize and nurture vulnerable aspects of consciousness, to provide the kind of care that supports healing rather than mere management of symptoms. The most mysterious element of the vision was seeing many different women who I knew instinctively were connected together, but I couldn't pinpoint how. This represents one of Agrat Batmalat's most profound teachings about the hidden networks that connect consciousness across apparent differences. These women represent different expressions of feminine consciousness, different ways that the divine feminine manifests in human experience. They might appear completely different on the surface, different ages, backgrounds, personalities, circumstances, but the intuitive recognition of their connection points to deeper patterns that operate beneath surface awareness. This vision reveals what we might call soul recognition, the ability to perceive the underlying threads that connect beings at the level of essence rather than personality. It's the recognition that souls often travel in groups across lifetimes, playing different roles in each other's development, appearing in different forms but maintaining deeper connections. In the context of the psychiatric hospital, these connected women might represent different ways the feminine consciousness responds to trauma, oppression, or spiritual awakening. Some might appear as patients, some as staff, some as visitors, but all are part of the same underlying pattern of feminine consciousness, working through various challenges and transformations. The practical application involves developing what we might call soul vision, the ability to recognize deeper connections and patterns that aren't visible to ordinary perception. This includes recognizing soul family members who appear in our lives in unexpected forms or circumstances, understanding karmic relationships that seem inexplicably intense or familiar, perceiving the underlying themes that connect seemingly random encounters or experiences, trusting intuitive recognition even when we can't explain the logical basis for our perceptions. What makes this specifically in Agrat Malat teaching is the way it progresses from shape-shifting divine forms to practical discernment skills. The blue cyclops with its single eye of unified vision represents the goal, developing the kind of perception that sees essence directly rather than being confused by surface appearances. The babysitter selection and psychiatric hospital work represent the training ground where we learn to apply this unified vision to real-world situations. We practice seeing character over appearance, recognizing healing potential in apparent pathology, and perceiving hidden connections that operate beneath surface awareness. This progression from mystical vision to practical application is characteristic of mature spiritual teaching. It's not enough to have visionary experiences or mystical insights. We must learn to translate these perceptions into skillful navigation of human relationships and life circumstances. The integration involves several key practices: developing single eye vision, learning to perceive with the unified awareness of the Cyclops rather than the divided perception of ordinary consciousness. This means seeing situations from the perspective of essence rather than being distracted by surface details. Character recognition training. Practicing the father figure's teachings by consciously looking past appearances to discern the underlying character qualities that determine how someone will actually behave in important situations. Therapeutic presence. Developing the kind of authentic care that can help wounded aspects of consciousness, whether in ourselves or others, find healing through genuine recognition and acceptance. Soul network awareness. Cultivating sensitivity to the hidden connections and patterns that link souls across apparent differences, learning to trust intuitive recognition even when we can't explain it logically. How do we apply Agrat Bat Malat's teachings in daily life? How do we develop the discernment skills and soul recognition abilities that this vision revealed? Single eye practice. Begin each day by setting the intention to see with unified vision rather than divided perception. When encountering people or situations, ask, what is the essence here beneath the surface appearance? Character assessment training. Before making important decisions about relationships, partnerships, or trust, take time to observe character over multiple interactions rather than relying on first impressions or impressive presentations. Therapeutic listening. When friends, family members, or colleagues are struggling, Practice offering the kind of authentic presence that allows healing rather than trying to fix, judge, or change them. Soul recognition journaling. Keep track of encounters with people who feel inexplicably familiar or significant. Notice patterns in the types of souls you attract and the lessons these relationships offer. Shape-shifting acceptance. When divine guidance appears in unexpected or challenging forms, focus on the consistent essence, the blue coloration, rather than being disturbed by changing manifestations. Interconnection awareness. Regularly contemplate the hidden threads that connect your experiences, relationships, and circumstances. Ask, how might these apparently separate events be part of a larger pattern? One of the most radical aspects of Agrat Bat Malat's teaching is the reframing of psychiatric hospitals, and by extension, all places where wounded consciousness gathers, as sacred spaces where important spiritual work occurs. Rather than seeing mental illness as purely pathological, this vision suggests that some forms of psychological disturbance represent authentic responses to genuine spiritual and social problems. This doesn't mean romanticizing mental illness or avoiding necessary treatment, but rather recognizing that what conventional society labels as madness sometimes contains important truths that need to be heard and integrated. The women in the hospital weren't just patients to be managed, but bearers of feminine wisdom that had been traumatized or suppressed. Working in this environment becomes a form of spiritual service, offering the kind of authentic recognition and care that can help integrate wounded aspects of consciousness back into wholeness. This applies not just to professional caregivers, but to anyone who encounters people struggling with mental health challenges, addiction, trauma, or spiritual crisis. The practical application involves developing what we might call sacred witnessing, the ability to see the divine essence in consciousness that has been wounded, rejected, or pathologized. This includes recognizing spiritual emergency versus spiritual emergence in ourselves and others, offering presence rather than solutions when encountering psychological distress, creating safe spaces where wounded aspects of consciousness can express themselves without judgment, integrating shadow material that has been rejected by conventional spiritual approaches. What emerges from this vision is a complete reframing of Agrat Bat Malat's role in nature. Rather than the dangerous seductress of conventional demonology, she reveals herself as a sophisticated teacher of spiritual discernment and soul recognition. Her lessons progress logically from mystical vision to practical application, from receiving divine nourishment to developing divine sight. The shape-shifting blue-skinned beings represent the consistent essence of divine guidance that appears in whatever form we're capable of receiving. The father figure's teachings about the character over appearance provides the foundational skill for all spiritual discernment. The psychiatric hospital work reveals how this discernment applies to recognizing and caring for wounded consciousness, and the network of connected women points toward the deeper patterns that link souls across apparent differences. Together, these teachings offer a comprehensive curriculum in seeing beyond surface appearances to recognize the underlying reality that operates in all situations. This is desperately needed wisdom in our current era of social media presentations, spiritual marketing, and surface level interactions. The question for each of us is, are we willing to develop the single eye of the Cyclops, that unified vision that sees essence directly rather than being confused by changing appearances? Can we learn to discern character over presentation, essence over form, soul connection over social category? And perhaps most challenging, can we recognize the sacred even in places and people that conventional society has labeled as broken, dangerous, or pathological? The blue-skinned Cyclops continues to observe with its single eye of unified vision The father figure continues to teach discernment through patient guidance. The wounded feminine consciousness in the hospital continues to offer its wisdom to those with eyes to see. The question is whether we're ready to receive these teachings and apply them in service of greater recognition, deeper discernment, and more authentic care for the full spectrum of consciousness in all its manifestations. Thank you for joining me in exploring Agrat Batmalat's teaching about developing discernment and soul recognition. I encourage you to practice seeing with single-eye vision, to discern character over appearance in your relationships, and to recognize the sacred even in places where consciousness appears wounded or rejected. Until next time, remember, the divine appears in whatever form we're capable of receiving, and our task is to develop the vision that recognizes essence beneath all changing appearances.